Okay, Julie, do you want to start?
Okay, I'm just welcome everybody. I think people are still logging in, so I won't say too much right now, but I think we're expecting a good turnout today. Although the sun is shining, so I'm wondering if people have decided to go outside for lunch. But hopefully they won't have, and they'll be all here. My name's Julie Harrison, and I've been working with the Engineering Together team to put this In It Together series together. And it's been an absolutely brilliant series. We've had every fortnight, we've had guest speakers on and various subjects. And this is our final one in this series, all talking about careers. People are still arriving. On the screen there, you can see our past events. And in fact, I have to say that I learned a lot with some of these events as well. It's absolutely been amazing. Some excellent speakers. We've got some brilliant speakers again today, of course. So we're talking about the next steps for career success. We do only have an hour, and we're going to be very strict about that. We must finish on time. Can we go to the next screen, please? Today's speakers, our first speaker is Dan Money. Dan's the Jacobs Talent Acquisition Lead, and he's going to talk all about, well, I'm going to let Dan tell you what he's going to talk about. Okay, thank you, Dan.
Yeah, thanks, Julie. Yeah, I lead the early careers recruitment team here at Jacobs in the UK and Ireland, which I guess is probably most relevant to the demographic that you guys are in. And I just thought it'd be useful to give you an overview of how Jacobs recruit early careers talent in the current climate, and that hopefully will give you then a wider view of how large corporates view early careers talent and how we're looking to engage with you guys, and the kind of tools and methods and differences, because it's changed within the last year. You know, COVID has really changed the way we recruit talent, the way we engage with talent. So yeah, next slide, please. So look, Jacobs, our strapline, as cheesy and as American as it sounds, challenging today and reinventing tomorrow, really does play into early careers talent and recruiting early careers talent. You know, we say the world needs innovators and problem solvers, and that's pretty much the remit that I get given every autumn. Go out and find the future innovators and problem solvers. We have three routes into Jacobs through the early career stream: apprentices, which are essentially either people who've just finished GCSEs or finished A-levels and don't really want to go to university or college in that conventional sense, would rather learn on the job and do their HND, HNC or degrees via day release. We have graduates, which are people straight out of university, but we also have summer interns and work experience, which is a program which we've rejigged it this year. Obviously last year with COVID didn't really happen, so this year we're really rejigging how we do interns and summer placements this year. So yeah, next slide. So here's an example just of Jacobs. You know, we're a large corporate. People think we, apart from the obvious jobs, are making crackers, which is a different Jacobs. We're a large engineering and construction company, which kind of paints the image in people's heads that you've got to be an engineer to join Jacobs. That's not true. We are a large, multidisciplinary, international company, offices all over the world, and we recruit all across all levels of seniority into these various different disciplines. So yeah, your typical civil engineers, electrical, mechanical engineers, all the typical engineering disciplines you'd probably assume with us. But also now, as we evolve as a business, we're getting more digital, we are getting more consultative, we're getting more strategic planning. So with that comes other disciplines. We're under the heading of more digital, we've now got a digital factory where we're creating and developing our own software, our own web apps, and doing our own data science. So as you can see from this slide, it isn't just engineering, it's a wide range of disciplines that we're looking to recruit. My colleague Carl will talk more around the STEM or STEAM disciplines later, but pretty much all across the spectrum now we're looking to recruit. It isn't just civil engineers from XYZ university. You know, it's people with graphic design, with maths, with economics, with geography, with environmental science, environmental planning, QSs, risk. So what the full range really that we're looking to recruit. Next slide, please. So, just to take that back a little bit further, yes, the technical skills are maths, physics, STEAM, those kind of subjects, but now what we're doing is very similar to what a lot of large corporates are doing. That we've got, on the one hand, you've got your technical skills, but then on the other hand, we're recruiting based on personality and competency. So their headings here: resilience, curiosity, self-discipline, learning agility. They're, to us, what we see as important as somebody who's got a first-class degree from Cambridge in maths. If you don't have these personality traits, chances are you probably won't get a job at Jacobs, and if you do, the evidence shows you wouldn't be as successful as in a career at Jacobs. Next slide. So what we've seen in the last year is a real fast forward of the digital approach to recruitment. In the old days, face-to-face interviews, assessment centres, really high touch processes that really, firstly, haven't been possible through COVID, but there was also moves to do away with these before COVID struck. So what you've seen is probably 5 years of development fast forward into the last 12 months. What we've seen is that we no longer do face-to-face interviews where you're in the room out as the person that's recruiting you, and there's a very, very high possibility we'll never go back to that. Assessment centres, again, obviously for the last 12 months, having 30 random strangers traveling across the country to sit in a room, what wasn't possible, but also we'd already started to question whether that was a sustainable methodology of recruitment. Just from a carbon footprint and an economic cost alone for the candidate and the business, it just wasn't the right way to go about business. So what we've seen is a new process design. So applicants, we designed it specifically so applicants can go from learning about Jacobs and who we are right the way through the process and receiving and accepting their contract on a mobile phone. That's pretty much how we've designed our early careers recruitment strategy for the last 12 months and going forward. The people we're looking to recruit, no longer go to the library, go to the career service, get the laptop out. It's all in the palm of their hand, and that's where we wanted to really focus our attempts to design a process that meant that everybody could recruit or be recruited via that process. All the benefits around reducing carbon footprint, reducing cost, increasing safety of our staff, but also the speed to recruit. We no longer have to book a meeting room 3 weeks in advance and book the room out and get 30 people in. We can recruit in real time. We can get us an application in and really fast forward it through the process within 24 hours. It's been a more dynamic experience, which is the feedback we've had from this year's cohort. And it's something that, again, is not just Jacobs, it's Sainsbury's, it's Aldi, it's IBM, it's Royal Bank of Scotland, it's Siemens, all our large corporate competitors, if you would, for the early careers talent are doing exactly the same thing. So, that's what I'm here today is really trying to give you that impression that recruitment in the early career space is essentially getting more virtual. It's getting more online, and the opportunities to meet people face to face is probably going to decrease and stay at this level for the foreseeable. The benefits to us, we've seen an increase in our ability to recruit neurodiverse talent, people that are shy, where going into a room with 30 people in an assessment centre probably wasn't going to bring out the best in them. Doing it this way, it gives those people the opportunity to shine. It gives us more data to make those decisions. And one of the competencies we do test for is digital readiness and digital agility. And doing this process shows, by getting through that process, that you do have the digital skills to be able to succeed at a company like Jacobs. Next slide, please. So what does that look like? We've embraced tech. We've really jumped in two-footed. Those of my colleagues that have been at Jacobs for a while will probably say that Jacobs haven't always been at the cutting edge of technology. We've kind of gone full circle now. We kind of are. We've introduced things like solo interviews alongside CVs. So once you've been longlisted from your CV, we ask you to video yourself on your phone answering 5 generic questions, and then as part of the process, that recording sits alongside your CV. So it isn't just a one-dimensional 2-page document. It's also a 5, 6, 8 minute vox pox of you answering those generic questions, so we get a better feel for you as a person. Again, gives us more data to make that decision. Those recordings and CVs can then easily be circulated around various hiring managers. So it isn't just you're not just meeting one hiring manager who, if they don't like you, that's it. It's a lot more flexible and a lot more versatile. Like I say as well, we are doing more for virtual interviews. So there are sessions like this rather than actually traipsing across the UK. If you're in London and you're applying for a job in Glasgow, you got to travel to Glasgow, then you apply for a job in Cardiff, you got to travel over to Cardiff. What we're finding now is with tech, we can do one face-to-face interview like this, we can record it, and then we can circulate that. So rather than going for 3 or 4 interviews within Jacobs, you can just do one interview, and the various hiring managers can then review that recording and then make that decision, rather than you having to do 4 or 5 different interviews. Next slide. And probably the biggest game changer for us is we are now introduced gamify testing, which is a game-based assessments. You know, in old money psychometric testing, but in new money, rather than 1,000 multiple choice questions, it's blowing up balloons with a space bar. It's matching shapes to one another. It's picking out odd one out with your space bar. And that is really a game changer for us as Jacobs. We've identified the key competencies that a successful graduate and a successful senior person in Jacobs, we've tracked those key competencies and we're testing those at entry point. And again, it's not just us. We stole this idea off Siemens, who've been doing it for 4 or 5 years. Sainsbury's do it. All the large corporates now are shifting towards personality-driven recruitment. So it isn't just what qualifications you've got on paper that are going to determine your job. It's who you are as a person and what competencies and personality traits that you have. Next slide. So yeah, just to really the focus on that, you know, as an example, they're the kind of 3 key traits. Well, we've got 7 or 8, but we don't want to give too many trade secrets away. But really, the top 3 that everyone down from our CEO Steve Demetrio right the way down to the 18-year-old apprentices that have been recruiting this morning. You know, the 3 key competencies we're looking for: intellectual curiosity. Everybody at Jacobs has that desire to learn more, self-discipline, learning agility. Those are the key traits that we see. Other corporates may have different core traits, but the chances are they're going to be testing them in a similar way to the way we do at Jacobs. Next slide. So just to give you an overview, really, final couple of slides, and then I've talked enough. In terms of the timeline, we recruit our really early careers talent for the following September. We start in September, October, November of this year. So just as graduates of going into their final, going into their final year, just as people are, finishing to closing up their A levels, this is when we're looking to recruit graduates. Next slide is apprentices, which is a similar timeline, but we're looking to recruit the year early. So the advice I can give as well is, don't wait till you finish your exams. Don't wait till you finish your degree, because again, it's not just Jacobs. The needle has shifted in the last 4 or 5 years away from that recruiting grads all year round. It is now very much condensed to that autumn. Apprentices, you enroll in your course in August, you start work in September. So we're looking to recruit and line up the best talent in January, February, March for the following September. It isn't a case of, right, people have finished their exams, right, let's go recruit. It's more, how can we get the best talent and line up the best talent to join Jacobs? And again, it isn't just Jacobs. In some ways, we're playing catch up on that, because we've historically been really bad at having a timeline and a calendar like this. Part of coming into this role, I've been really trying to squeeze everybody onto this timeline, because historically Jacobs have recruited all year round. It meant the talent's been disjointed. It's meant we've been here, there, and everywhere, where our competitors have been sharp and really focused on recruiting the best talent in the autumn and the winter for the following year. So that is, again, where we're trying to get ourselves. And for you as candidates, be looking 6-12 months ahead for your career decisions if you're looking for a career with large corporates like Jacobs. So I think that's me. I think I've yes, thank God, yes, I've talked enough. So any Q&A, like, these sessions work better when you've got loads of questions, because I can waffle on and go off in totally different tangents and bore the hell out of you. So come up with some questions and hopefully I can help you at the end.
That's great. Thanks, Dan. That was really interesting. It was so interesting that I forgot to turn my camera off and sound, because I actually do deliver careers advice to schools. So I will be asking you a question later about that. But yes, I did meant to say we have a question and answer session at the end. We'll hear from the speakers first. If you'd like to put your questions in the chat, please, and we can ask them then at the end of the session. I'd like to now introduce Cara Connon, and she's also going to talk about careers. Thank you, Cara.
Thank you. Next slide, please. Hello, I'm Cara. I've worked with Jacobs for over 10 years now as a stakeholder manager, specialising in education. And as of last November, I've been STEAM lead for Europe. I work closely with school pupils of varying ages, including designing and delivering work experience programmes, where we give attendees advice on steps to gain employment. Today, I'm going to focus on the do's and don'ts of social media, the importance of practice, how to make your CV stand out, and some advice in both face-to-face and digital interviews. So I'm sure you're aware that what you put on your social media affects the likelihood of gaining employment. But did you know that 93% of employers say that they'll Google the candidate in advance and 50% will be disqualified just due to their social media? So there's nothing wrong with having a social media presence, but it's how you do it. It's how you use the different platforms to your advantage and not letting them put you at a disadvantage. So ask someone who isn't on your friends list to check what information they can see on your Facebook, on your Twitter, on your Instagram, if they Google you. And if they can see something that you don't want an employer to see, update your privacy settings. And just have some sense, don't add comments to posts that can be perceived negatively or cause upset, even if it's just a joke between you and your friends. Next slide, please. So social media can actually be a huge help in gaining employment. If you haven't already created a LinkedIn page, really think about how you brand yourself. You're essentially selling yourself to future employers. So what would they like to see on your profile? Is it your technical skills? Is it your, like what are your competition putting out there that you could enhance on? Is it your adaptability? So use a sensible professional picture and include a tagline which sums you up in a sentence. So I've used an example here of one of my colleagues, Judith McVinney, as a really, really good example of a LinkedIn account. So although we wouldn't recommend including a photograph with a CV application, you should have a clear image of yourself, have good lighting, a non-busy background, forward-facing, and only you in the shot, just as Judith has got here. And if you're known by different names, for example, if you've got a maiden name, include both to help your contacts find you. And Judith has very cleverly included a tagline, a short, snappy sentence to tell future employees what is important to her. You'll see she's got over 500 connections and regularly shares content with her network, and she's updated her key skills so employers know at a glance what her specialities are. So sites like LinkedIn are as much about employers advertising jobs available in their business as it is about you showing that you're available for employment and interested in that industry. So begin setting up your network. You don't need to know the person to ask them to connect. And it's not so much about numbers as it is about relevant connections. So follow businesses in the industry that you're interested in and read their posts to find out what's important to them, who their key clients are, what's the most up-to-date information on that business. And by liking and sharing this content, you find interesting following industry leaders, you're making yourself visible to these people in their own networks. But be aware, don't send relentless messages to anyone in the organization. There will be a team who process the job openings and the applications. So social media will not help you find a job without your interaction and proactivity. It's there to support you finding employment, but a job isn't just going to land in your inbox. So make sure you're using it regularly and proactively, sharing and uploading content and increasing your network and building your relationships with these companies. Next slide, please. We move to the next slide. Thank you. So now that your social media accounts are private and you've set up your LinkedIn account, it's time to write your CV. The CV stands for curriculum vitae, which means the course of life. So your CV is a document where you outline your skills in education and the job that you're hoping to apply for. Your aim is to make your CV stand out from the others applying for a job, but should be no longer than 2 sides of A4. So really consider what information you're including. And tailor your CV and your cover letter for each job that you apply for, making it as relevant as possible to the job description. And also try and weave in some key phrases of the words that are in the job description. The cover letter goes along with your CV and should explain why you're applying for the job and what you think you can bring to that company. So keep it concise and try not to use generic statements like, I'm a good team worker, without being able to back them up. In your CV, include your name and your phone number, but typically not a photograph. And you should include a short section on your hobbies and activities, and I'll come on to why that's important in a minute. You should include a section on people who can vouch for you, called references or referees. Whilst you don't need to put their personal details on your CV, you can just say something like references available on request. And think really carefully about who you use, who is going to be the advocate for you, and make sure you get the person's permission in advance as well. And one last thing, before you press send or print, check your spelling and your grammar. Next slide. So once you've successfully got the interview, it's time to practice answering some common questions that are likely to come up. These are likely to be based around the job description, what you put in your application or CV, and examples on how you approach or succeed in various scenarios. Hopefully, you've already researched the company when applying to know what some of the work that they do, but now's your time to really drill into what those companies' values are and their key clients and their projects. At the end of the interview, you're likely to get asked if you have any questions for the interviewer, and this is your opportunity to show that you've really done your homework. There are a number of websites out there which will provide you with practice interview questions and helpful advice. So practice answering these questions yourself and get a friend or a family member to ask you questions and get their honest feedback and take it on board. You could also video yourself answering questions, and remember your body language is equally as important as your answers. And as Dan was saying there, that's actually part of the process now that they may set you 5 questions to video yourself answering in advance. Try and think of personal examples when answering the questions. By doing this in advance, if the question comes up in an interview, you're armed with a great answer that you've already practiced. It's perfectly normal to be nervous before an interview, but just remember that interviewers are not there to catch you out. They're just normal people who would like to hear more about how you'd fit into their business. The interviewer is not looking for you to regurgitate your CV. Your CV is a short snapshot of your skills in education, but the interview is where they're likely to want to hear the examples and the stories behind your CV. If your interview is in person, make sure you know the directions to the office. If you can't check it out in person, consider using Google Street View so that you can visualize where you're going. Arrive at least 10 minutes early and make yourself known to reception, and make sure you know the name of the interviewer and be polite to the receptionist, which sounds really silly, but I've heard of occasions where the receptionist has been asked about the interviewee's behavior while they've been waiting on an interview. Did they talk to the receptionist? Were they polite? Did they know who to ask for? Did they sit and play games on their phone? When you're called in for your interview, even though you're nervous, try and maintain a positive, friendly attitude and take your time to consider the answers. It's okay to say, if you don't have an answer straight away, and I have a moment to think about that. In your CV, I mentioned including your hobbies. If asked a question on, say, teamwork, but you can't think of a work-related example, draw on something from your personal life. For example, perhaps you've been part of a team of playing football or a netball. As mentioned before, a couple of good questions up your sleeve for the interviewers at the end, such as, what do you most enjoy about working here? Or, I saw on your website that inclusion and diversity are a big part of your core values. How do you see those working every day? Things like that to show that you've done your research into that company beforehand. And at the end of the interview, thank the interviewers, let them know you would welcome any feedback from them. And you may also want to ask when a decision on the post will be made. It's highly unlikely that throughout your life, you'll get every single position that you do an interview for. So although you'll obviously feel disheartened, use that experience to make you stronger and more prepared for the next one. So always ask the interviewer for feedback if you don't get the job, and incorporate advice into the next interview. Next slide, please. So part of my job is working with Transport Scotland on the dualling of the A9, and as part of this project, there's a huge educational initiative. We work with most years of primary and secondary school, and our school leavers workshop is called Next Steps. So Next Steps gets people ready for the workplace, and we provide them with a delegates pack with useful hints, tips, example interview questions, CV advice, and much more. So if you'd like to visit the Academy 9 website, navigate to the core activities page and scroll to the bottom, you can access these free resources which go over a lot of what I've covered in this presentation. And while the advice from the presentation is close in your minds, why not go and check out your social media accounts or create your LinkedIn page, or even do that recording of yourself answering the interview questions. Hope this has been helpful, and Dan and I are here to answer any questions, but in the meantime, good luck in gaining employment, and remember, practice, practice, practice.
That's great. Thank you, Cara. I'm a bit, I've been around a long time. I don't want to say how long, but all of that advice was really fresh for me. So I think throughout your career, it's great to be reminded of some things. So thank you for that. And I go into schools and deliver career sessions myself. So I found that really helpful as well. And I'm certainly going to check up your website. I'm just going to hand over to Victoria now, who's now going to look at the questions you've put in the chat. And we'll also invite people to actually ask questions if they'd like to ask them live.
Okay, thanks, Julie. Hi, everyone. Thanks for the questions. I'll pick on the first one from Joe. It's a question for Dan. So Dan, have you seen any downsides to the new way of recruiting?
It sounds really corporate, but no. There's probably more internal. Some hiring managers have been a little bit, I'm not sure about it. But from a candidate perspective, like I say, it's how other large corporates have been doing it for a few years. So, as nervous as we were when we first introduced this process, the feedback from the candidates were, we're used to it. That's what we do at other companies. The gamified testing, we're like, not sure how that will go. But then you speak to candidates and I did it with Atkins, I did it with BAE, I did it with Sainsbury's, everybody else is doing it. So as new as it feels to us, it isn't new. So, from our perspective, there's a few process and logistical issues which are an absolute nightmare, but from a candidate and a hiring manager perspective, not seen any real downsides.
Okay, good. That's good. Thanks, Dan. The next question is for Cara. What are your thoughts on posting and speaking on your political opinions on social media, both positive and negative?
I personally would highly suggest you didn't. Don't put anything contentious up on your social media. Unless your job is within the political arena, it's probably not relevant to that job. And what you don't want to do is instantly take yourself off of a list of potential candidates because the person doing the interview, as much as they might try not to be biased one way or another, we do have these unconscious biases. So I personally would suggest you didn't put anything political up anywhere that you don't want an employer to see it.
Thanks, Cara. And I've certainly learned how powerful LinkedIn is as a tool in connecting with people and also looking for jobs as well. It's really, really useful tool. Okay, thanks. So I think the next question is for you, Dan. I know some students who haven't yet applied for jobs. What would the advice be if they wanted to apply to Jacobs/others, given the deadlines have gone? So that's from Paula.
I guess you just have to look, as much as we've tried to stick to that calendar that I was talking through earlier, there are some jobs that don't get filled. There are some jobs, I'm thinking graduate project manager in our nuclear business. We had 7 people lined up in January. 5 of them, I don't know what happened at Easter, but 5 of them turned us down in quick succession after Easter. So we have to go back to market for those. So there are odd jobs on the website now, but the bulk of the jobs, the bulk of the 300 graduates that we recruit a year do get filled in September, October, November, December. That's the peak season. So what I'd say is, keep an eye out now, but ultimately be ready to go in September and October, because that is when the bulk of the UK large corporates like us will be recruiting for graduates.
Okay, thanks, Dan. And Julie's question, I think this is a question for you as well, Dan. Schools have regular career days and interview practice with big employers.
Yep.
Now using digital. Do schools need to start using the same? What would you advise?
Very, very much so. You know, we toyed with the idea of doing away with face-to-face interviews before COVID. And this, like I said, this just fast forwarded that decision. It had probably taken us a couple of years to get to this point, but because of COVID, one of the benefits is we've got there straight away. So we will probably never go back to face-to-face interviews. We'll have face-to-face meetings once we've got maybe, you know, a chosen candidate, or if we're down to the final two, the manager might say, I'll take them both for a coffee. But the large bulk of the interviews will be done like this, you know, on Zoom, on Teams, on other platforms. So as much as interview skills are relevant face-to-face and virtually, that kind of little idiosyncrasies of being in a setting such as this really should continue to be practiced. But as time evolves, I say my 9-year-old FaceTimes my mum all the time. He FaceTimes grandma all the time. So you know, it's becoming the norm. But still, you know, there's certain things that, you know, older people like you, like some of us, probably need to practice more. But it is the way it is now, and I don't see it changing.
Okay, thank you. And there's a question from Charlotte. I'm a PhD student who is wanting to go into a graduate scheme and not into academia. Do you think my qualification will work for or against me?
Either or. You know, our grads are, whether you go back a step, we don't discriminate our grads whether you've got a BSc, an MSc, IMeng, BEng, or a PhD. Ultimately, our grads do the same role. So whatever qualification you've got coming in, you'll start on a grad salary and you'll do the 2-year grad program. So for people like we've got a PhD, they've probably got a little more knowledge and a little more life experience than someone, say, with a BEng. But as they're coming in to do the same job, they'll come in at the same level. Maybe their career may move at a faster rate once they're in, but they'll come in at the same entry point.
Okay, thanks, Dan. And there's a reply there. Thank you, Eleni. From personal experience, I can tell you it's a positive. I've been recruited for a graduate program to start in June. So thanks for that feedback. There's a question from Paula to Dan. So I have found it fascinating that the job market has changed so much. Is it for non-graduate jobs?
Pass. You know, the way it works at Jacobs, early careers is where we try out the new tech. So all this kind of gamified testing, solo interviews, we're trying out in early careers, and it's gone amazingly well, better than we ever expected. So there's a very good chance that we'll be using it for more experienced hires as well. I don't think we'll be getting, you know, senior engineers and technical directors to be doing a solo interview, you know, what's been your biggest success in life to date, etc. But I think the team's interview is probably going to come into the process. You know, when I'm thinking back, you know, a couple of years when I was doing experience recruitment, one of the slowest and hardest parts of the process was trying to find a slot where a hiring manager and a candidate could actually meet physically. This has been a game changer, that you can have a Teams meeting within 24 hours, you know, out of hours team meeting. People are working from home, different working patterns. So doing a Teams chat with somebody at 7-8 o'clock at night is the norm if someone's been to pick up the kids from school and whatever. So I think it's been a game changer, and I think it's going to bleed into all recruitment at all levels. I think this is the way it's going to be for the foreseeable future. And again, you know, that carbon footprint, that safety element of trying to get people to meet. You know, yeah, it'd be great if we could all meet, but practically, you know, getting someone to commute from Manchester to Liverpool to do an interview, is that required these days? Yeah, I don't think so. I think the way it is now, I think it's the way it's going to stay for a while.
Okay, thank you. And just another question for you, Dan. So how many years after graduation can you apply for a graduate program?
again, how long's a piece of string? If you graduate in that discipline, then obviously the longer it goes on, your skills haven't been built upon for that length of time. But I guess, I don't know, depends how good you are. You have to take it by case basis. There's no real shortage of candidates in certain roles. So if you're a civil engineer, then yeah, it's going to be tough. But if you're a nuclear physicist, then it's going to be probably a little more flexibility. So it depends on the role, depends on the person. So yeah.
Okay, thanks. I'll give you a rest now, Dan, and give Cara a question. So Cara, there's a question from Paula. What one piece of advice would you give a young person in school now?
I would say start making those connections in the industry that you want to work in, because you may finish school with similar qualifications to your peers. So what is it that's going to make a company look at you over them? So Dan and I were just discussing this yesterday. If you've done work experience, if you've done an internship, if you're commenting on their LinkedIn posts and sharing it, your name's already kind of available to them as someone who's showing an interest, who's focused on what industry they want to work in. So I would say, depending on what year you are, try and get work experience in a company similar to what you want to work in, and keep that going all the way through your school and through your university. And then when you come to do the university careers fairs, if it's university you're going to, for Jacobs is kind of the typical route, you'll be able to say on your application, or say to the person there, I've already had X, Y, Z experience with Jacobs, and I know your core values, and I know the emphasis that you put on whatever it is. So your name will stick in their mind as somebody who knows the company and has done their research.
Yeah, if I can just add to that, because I do a bit of mentoring at Sheffield Uni, and the guys that I mentor, I can't stress the importance of getting that work experience in that sector. Beg, borrow, steal, just get, even if it's free, unpaid, 2 weeks at the photocopier. If you can stick on there, you've done work experience at a company in that sector. Yeah, it elevates your CV. We get literally thousands. We had 12,000 applicants this year for 200 jobs. Me and my team go through them, and the ones that stand out are the ones that, like Cara said, did internships at Jacobs, did internships at competitors like Acom and Atkins. Though they're the ones that you go, right, okay, stick them in that pile. So beg, borrow, steal, and get as much experience in the sector as you can.
Thanks. I'll do a little plug as well. We're doing a virtual work experience week in June through High Tide Foundation charity and Speakers for Schools. So I'll add the link to the chat as well for people to apply to that if they're interested. Okay, so a question for Cara. What positive message would you give a young person who's thinking of a career in engineering?
I would say, I personally, I'm not an engineer. I've got a kind of more creative background, but companies such as Jacobs are so diverse in the amount of jobs that they've got in it that you could come in as a graduate. There's great progression for you. If you even decide that maybe engineering is not for you, or you want to do something additional like, community engagement, there's lots and lots of scope for you to move about and to get additional experience in different teams. So I couldn't emphasize enough how great it is to work on such a big company. I've worked for small, I've worked for big companies, and certainly I find the career progression and experience that you get from a large company has been fantastic.
Thanks, Cara. I think this is one for you, Dan. Is there still a shortage of engineers, or a particular discipline that you struggle to find?
Electrical. A one-word answer. Electrical engineers. Two-word answer. Electrical engineers, like rocking horse poo. They're just, yeah, they're very, very rare. Every other discipline's quite well subscribed. Electrical engineering, for whatever reason, isn't.
So it was a good one to get into then. There's such a demand and shortage.
Yeah, never be short work.
Thank you. Another question for you, Dan. So could you talk a bit on how game testing actually shows an applicant's personality and what is tested through them. I have had this experience in the past and found it quite uncomfortable, and always had this question: is it evaluated together with an interview, or as a first step in the process through which you can actually reject candidates?
Look, multiple questions there. The short answer is I don't know how it works. We pay, we use Arctic Shores. We pay them a lot of money to figure out how it works. The way we interpret the data is we've got benchmark of what we see as the key competencies for successful, especially graduate and early careers at Jacobs. Now, those competencies are tested by various different games. So when our candidates, we do it at just before interview stage, so we can talk about the results at the interview. So if we have two candidates that are very similar, but one scored low in certain areas, the hiring manager can say, well, technically they were both strong, but this one was slightly stronger in these areas. It isn't a pass or fail test. It is more, a conversation starter at the interview. That's how we're using it. The scores that people get don't really mean that much. It is, we've had people, get 90, 99 is a top score. We've had people get 99 that have been technically weak, so we've not recruited them. We've had others that have scored highly that just haven't come across well. So it's probably not what somebody of interest. We've also had people that have scored lowly, but you can look at the areas where they've scored low and take that decision then that, okay, they've scored low in this, but then Jacobs recruits such a broad range of disciplines that, some disciplines do score low. The intellectual curiosity of somebody who's, data scientist will be different to somebody who's, environmental impact assessment consultant. So it's just a different, we're still trying to figure it out, I guess, is the short, less waffly answer. But what we've seen, the large bulk of the data is showing that the people that do have good careers at Jacobs, the ones that do well at interview, the ones that we feel are a good fit, do score highly in these areas that we've identified. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you. I guess it's quite complex, isn't it? So it's...
Yeah, look, there's a whole range of occupational psychologists designing these games and evolving these games and taking all the data that come in and then manipulating it and changing this and tweaking that. What we ask for is, can we have a view of how candidates are scoring in these key areas for us? We've benchmarked against probably the top. We went to the business and asked who are your top performing graduates, then who are the middle of the road ones, what are the differences, where are these better than these ones? And then when we looked at those key competencies, like say learning agility, the ability to say, right, you're a highways engineer in Croydon, but we're going to stick you in the Leeds data science team for 6 months. The ones that go, okay, cool, I'm on with that. They're typically they're the ones that have scored better, and that's the kind of attitude we're trying to test for. So it's not perfect, but it's a good indicator for us.
Thanks, Dan. Another question from Julie. So what careers of the future do you see coming forward with tackling climate change? This is maybe a question for Cara as well, if Cara wanted to answer that one.
The short answer is I couldn't say for sure, but in my mind, I think what we'll probably be thinking about is these kind of innovative careers of, right, what we're doing right now is working, but it's not working fast enough. So how do we accelerate what we're doing to support climate change? And Jacobs are very, very focused on that. We've got a big team that work on sustainability. I imagine there'll be a lot to do with renewable energy, different fuel sources. I don't know is the honest answer, but happy to do some research and come back to anyone who's asked that.
Okay, thanks, Cara. I think that's all the questions. So thank you so much to everyone. That was really good questions there. There's a couple of links in the chat for, there's a fly in here. A couple of links to the chat for work experience and some links Laura shared for Newcastle University. And there's also an electrical and electronic engineer in the audience as well. So that's good to know.
Do they want a job?
Yeah.
Not joking.
Okay. Okay,
when can they start?
Yeah, I'll hand back over to Julie now to wrap up.
Hi, thanks for that, Victoria. I'd just first of all like to thank both the speakers, Cara and Dan, absolutely fantastic. It was difficult for me to concentrate because I could have chatted to both of you all day because for 10 years I've been going into schools, giving careers advice on engineering, which is why I was coming up with some of those questions. I'm delivering a session next week and I can now say to those pupils that we need more electrical engineers. So thanks for that, Dan. I'll highlight that to the students. So this is our last event. It's been a brilliant series. I'd like to actually thank Jo and Laura and Paula and Victoria. Who else? God, there was a few of us for putting these events together. They've been absolutely brilliant. If anybody's would like to see this again, we have been recording, and there will be on the Engineering Together YouTube site, which I think has been shared in the chat. And I've noticed that so they'll be there forever as well, so you can go back to them. And I've been asking teachers to go to the websites as well, so that they can see all of the events that we've had. We've also got, I'd just like to mention the Women in Engineering Society. For Women in Engineering Day, Engineering Together, I put an event on the 23rd of June entitled Hidden Heroes. And we'll be looking at the hidden heroes of engineering, the women in engineering. So if you're interested in that, please look out for I think I'm not sure if Paula's put that in the chat at all, or whether we're live on the Eventbrite, but if you'd like to check. So again, just to thank everybody, it's been a great session, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Julie.